Australia, considered by many to be one of the last lands to be explored by Western European society. Humans began to appear in Oceania and Australia 50,000 years ago. The societies that appeared there were extremely varied, as each social system, seemingly built from the ancient cultures of the lands that humans came from, were very much different. Millennia before that, people from Asia and Southeast Asia began moving into Oceania, bringing concepts of music, poetry, dance, and artistic performance. These cultural features evolved into traditions. Over time, owing to restyling from within and the influences of intercultural contact and renewing migrations, the traditions changed. Encounters between people of Oceania and outsiders began in the 1500s with Europeans. During that time, they began to write and illustrate about what they experienced, examples of music, movement, and costumes as seen from the outside eye. Sketchy early eyewitness accounts are invaluable resources when used alongside reports from missionaries, traders, whalers, tourists, beachcombers, anthropologists, and indigenous peoples. A large mat was laid upon the ground, and they began to dance upon it, putting their bodies into strange motions, writhing their mouths and shaking their tails, which made the numerous plates that hung about them flutter like a peacock's train. Sometimes they stood in a row, one behind the other, and then they fell down with their faces to the ground, leaning on their arms and shaking only their tails, the drums beating all the while, with which they kept exact time. An old man stood by as a prompter, and roared out as loud as he could at every change. These motions they continued till they were all in a sweat. They repeated them 3 times alternately, and, after they had done, the girls began. In the interval between the several parts of the drama, some men came forward, who seemed to act the part of drolls, and, by what I could distinguish, they attempted to represent the conquest of Uleita, by the men of Bola Bola, in which they exhibited the various stratagems used in the conquest, and were very vociferous, performing all in time to the drum. The fullest descriptions of 18th century oceanic music are from Cook's second voyage from 1772 to 1775. They prove that vocal and instrumental polyphony was indigenous to Tonga. Ensembles of stamped tudes and struck plaques accompanied dance poetry. Struck log idiophones produced different tones, and Tongans sang in parts. 2 or 3 women began a song which had something very cadenzful and musical in it, and certainly ran through a greater variety of notes than the Otaheite and the Isles, where all their tunes are a variation of 3 notes only, and at New Zealand of 5. To the song they beat time, with snapping the second finger and thumb, holding the 3 other fingers erect. Their voices were far from disagreeable, and what is still more remarkable, they were accompanying one another harmonically. When these had done, an opposite set of singers took them up, and at last they all chorused. These remarks reflect the observations of Lieutenant James Burney, born 1750, died 1821, eldest son of the English composer and music historian Charles Burney, born 1726, died 1814. James Burney in his own journal noted that Tongan music used a flattened third. They sing in parts, keeping the same time and varying the 4 notes without ever going beyond them. So many singers and so few notes, you always hear the whole together. The difference of worlds and voices makes some variety. The singers, that I heard, were all women. One confined herself entirely to the lower note, which acted as a drone. He added that the final chord was a minor triad. On Cook's 3rd voyage, Surgeon William Anderson stated, "Where there is a great number, they divide into several parties, each of whom sings on a different key, which makes it very agreeable music. In the same manner they vary the music of their flutes by playing on those of a different size." The Pacific War from 1941 to 1945 began a new era in Oceania. Its battles, bombings, and migrations disrupted and transformed many societies. Remote islands began to enter global economic, communicative, and transportation networks. Social disruptions were variable. Local effects depended on distance from major battles, sea lanes, and bases. The results of the war included advances in the mobility of populations and in technologies of transportation and communication. Wartime migrations included American and Japanese extensions into Oceania by invasions and counter-invasion. These movements touched thousands of islanders, fleeing battles, seeking economic opportunities, or conscripted to work as native defenders and laborers. The intrusion of outside forces, islanders' increased mobility, and introduced technologies of communication affected the genres, instruments, performance, and themes of oceanic music. Allied and Japanese military personnel moving into Oceania brought popular music of the 1930s and 1940s. On the Allied side, this included jazz, boogie-woogie, swing, jitterbug, big band music, Tin Pan Alley music, marches, blues, national anthems, and children's music. In Bougainville, which the Japanese occupied in 1942, a Roman Catholic missionary lamented that children learned Japanese songs faster than they did learn his hymns. Islanders working alongside Japanese and Allied troops picked up these songs, many of which survived locally for decades. The melodies survived longer and more intact than the lyrics, whether English or Japanese. Michael Samar, the first Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, included in his autobiography a version of the Japanese national anthem that he learned with other songs from a Japanese officer in the 1940s. On the Allied side, the most popular song may have been You Are My Sunshine. In the 1990s, people in Oceania continued to sing it, with local inflections of the melody and meter. Other locally popular songs were Show Me the Way to Go Home, Down Mexico Way, and God Be With You Till We Meet Again. Now we enter the modern day, now that music has really had a foothold, rather Western music, and has kind of changed the culture. So now we sit at a crossroads where we have a mixture of oceanic influence and Western music. And now we stare at this mixture, and now we come to a point where we can consider this its own kind of music, because while it may be modern and there might be covers of songs, there is still oceanic influence in there, and we must never forget the music of before, because we may call this modern music, but it doesn't change the fact that the music of before was equally as interesting. Thanks for listening.